Welcome to the Accountable Intelligence Podcast.
Alrighty, so here we are back again. Again, this is Accountable Intelligence, and I'm Lucas Truax, and Sean is sitting across the virtual table from me here. And what we were going to dive into some today is really some of the industry impacts of things like AI. So industry wise, we've heard quite a bit about what could happen with AI. We're going to focus in on like what are the specific things we see as maybe potential causes that would come out of AI, we'll say proliferating, to use weapons terminology, across or in usage across the world and across the United States specifically. So we'll probably delve into some other items of interest today, but that's really going to be kind of the primary focus for what we're for the podcast this morning. Sorry, stumbling around here already. Need to crank another energy drink, I guess. But so I think let's first maybe start, Sean, with the industry we're familiar with, and that is the technology sector. So one of the things that stands out to me is and probably maybe what kind of started off this conversation is for technology, the impact that AI companies believe they're going to have, and this is like even what they've been publishing on traditionally white collar jobs in specifically technology sector. So I don't know, what are your thoughts maybe on impacts to that industry specifically?
Yeah, great question, man. So when I think about this, there's the idea of looking at this as your average consumer, your maybe even your mom and pop, your mom and pop businesses and things like that. And my first thought is obviously there's the worry around, hey, how is this going to take away my ability to put food on the table?
Yeah.
Um, we have kids, right? We have kids. The traditional jobs and career paths that we thought would be, ways to send our kids. Are those still possible? Is that still wise to advise your kids in that way? Um, but the tech person in me, and kind of being in industry, being in GovCon and cybersecurity, and seeing some of the daily changes. When we started thinking about true agentic AI, um,
Yeah.
I just see things changing so fast. It's hard to really grasp what the impact's going to be. You have what we have today. What we're seeing now is you know true agentic workflows being implemented. It might not be things you see uh, in your everyday life, or if you pull up social media or if you pull up the news, you might not be aware of that. But you can kind of see it in the background. Every day there's something new. There's a new large language model, or there's a new capability. And being in GovCon and industry, you're starting to see people offer new service offerings and new things like that. So very fast paced and rapidly changing. Now on the other side of that, the question becomes how effective are these are these new things that are being thrown out there? Do you have are people just trying to sell the new latest greatest thing in agentic AI, or leveraging AI in whatever way that is, or is there a true uh, a true service being offered?
Yeah.
That those are my first thoughts. Uh, Specifically,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Us, my company being in GovCon, what we're seeing now is a lot of agencies leveraging AI to review proposals. And the question there becomes, okay, well, yes, we can see where it would be a lot more efficient to review 500 proposals, or 50 proposals, when you have a smaller workforce. The government has downsized and things like that. But are you getting the best proposals when you do that? Is or are you just getting the proposals that are written the best according to whatever AI tool was used to read those.
Yeah, good
So
point.
yeah, little bit concerning. And then as a small shop, yeah, you could be concerned, but being concerned and not making the shift towards however the game is played can get you out of business really fast.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a tough
that's
thing
good
to
context. And like
balance.
even digging in on your AI proposal, just using AI as a review mechanism. I mean, certainly, I think just as you mentioned, as tech people, we'd say sure, automate as much as you can, like leverage it. But what we're talking about now, though, is the AI tool may be the primary mechanism by which they're using to evaluate your company's submission, right? So like, it may be the only thing that's looked at, and then maybe they use that to cut out 90% and then review the top 10%. Maybe they just review all 100% and even the decision gets spit out. But that tool, as we've seen already over and over again, repeated in in stories and studies, that tool is going to have bias. So if, for example, maybe those folks are using Claude as a review
That's right.
agentic reviewer, right? So is Claude gonna bias Claude submissions? Because I'm sure the submission folks are also using some Claude or some other agentic tools in their proposals. Where do you where how and where can you evaluate what biases from the models actually impact you as a company? So that's a huge risk just from a livelihood perspective. So yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
example.
that's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that. I'll write that down and take that into account now.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
great
There
point,
was a
man. Yeah, there's a lot to think about there. And that can that can be spread across so many different industries and in so many different ways. I personally feel like while I'm watching all this and taking all this in, because things are changing so rapidly, like I said, you're like it's like a double dutch line. Like you want to get in there. You're trying to
yeah,
time when do I jump in there and start
yeah.
going. And
That's right.
if you don't get in there, there's never going to be a right time. But if you don't jump, then the idea is like, am I going to get left behind? Is it going to be too
Yeah,
late?
for
Um,
sure.
but
And I think so.
yeah,
Something you touched on there as well is that I think especially in technology, we've heard a lot of technology buzzwords over the last decades, 2 decades, right? And a lot of those things you hear zero trust, you hear things like next generation, where I mean the next generation is like firewalls, for example, was used for probably it's probably still being used 25 years later. Everything's a next generation firewall, right? And then you have
yeah,
other things that like post quantum crypto. There are all of these different items that people throw around pretty loosely to say that they're transformative, right? But I do think though that we and the industry at large and even creators of AI models would agree that AI certainly is beyond a buzzword from its transformational impact. And I think, and you mentioned this as well. What everyone's disagreeing on, or sorry, what everyone is not disagreeing on is the impact. What everyone is just trying to figure out is, as you said, how severe, like how drastically severe. They're not even saying it's going to be minor. They're saying, okay, it's going to be a severity level of like 8 to 10. We're just trying to figure out whether it's 10 or whether it's 11, and it's kind of the the thing that puts humanity out of business, essentially.
yeah. And to add on to that, the scary thing there is, the target is constantly moving at a pace that is not his. We haven't. You don't see things move at this or progress at this rate. This is
Yeah.
not from a historical perspective something you see all the time. I forget there's a there's a curve every so often in time. There is something historically that is this impactful. Like I think I saw something where they said AI will have as much of an impact on the progression of technology as I forget the name of it, but there was I think it was as much as the polio vaccine or something like that.
Wow.
It'll have as much impact on
Hmm.
society as the polio vaccine or something like that. So if you
Yeah.
think about that, going back to I'm kind of talking in a circle here, but I'm going to bring this back around. If you think about that, you're trying to measure impact, it's hard to do that because things are moving at such a rapid pace.
Yeah.
That target is constantly changing. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, yeah, um,
So on the impact question, I think if we're talking about industry impact specifically, that even the AI companies are putting out things that and they call them exposure reports, and essentially it's saying they say, okay, here are the list of jobs that we feel like can almost entirely, or I mean, they provide percentages to a certain degree, percentage wise, can be automated. So Anthropic does has done this a couple times, and they I think they have maybe a more rigorous approach to what they see as the vulnerable jobs and like how far into that job the agentic AI can get. And the majority of those are really traditionally white collar, probably well paying jobs that now agentic AI can take over the primary lead on that task. And again, I think in truth in lending it's probably not them taking over the entire task. So, for example, one of the number one impacted role, according to Anthropic, is computer programming, right? So you have these agents that can work all night for you and build out a full stack program from like web interface all the way to the database, and then even set up the accounts to kind of make it work, link them together, open your firewall rules, do all of that work for you. But you're still going to have someone who essentially reviews that, pushes it out, and kind of provides the oversight currently. Now, that's currently right because the tools honestly can probably do a better job than most of our senior developers can do in their current state, right? So that's scary for software programmers, I'm sure. But that's what's listed as the kind of the top impacted
yeah,
industry or
yeah.
industry or
Industry,
occupations.
yeah.
What the word I'm looking for? Yeah, the occupations. But then you also have a lot of other kind of tangential ones, and that but one that is a huge industry. That's gonna have a lot of bow wave impacts across the industry because you're talking about computer programming, but computer programming makes up so much of what is consumed and used, and it's really a part of the economy today. So the programming piece feeds into something called software as a service. And software as a service, I mean, we're on a podcast platform that's provided to us in a software as a service format, right? So that's
Yep.
built out by software developers, testers, etc. But what folks are what AI experts are predicting occurring is that SaaSes will essentially lose a tremendous amount of market share because people can build and provide the same services at a very minimal cost to themselves. So I think there's like I think always there's like a first order impact from something like this, again, computer programming, but then also the second and third order impact might be the kind of the certainly significant profit loss, but also maybe a loss of an industry of like SaaS providers or significant reduction there because it's so easy to simply generate something that can do the same work. So
That's
a
right.
couple
That's
levels
right.
of impact there just for
Every
programmers.
employee can be an innovator.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
for better or worse, I guess. Yeah,
For better or
and,
worse, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's something in not to overhype it, maybe bring back a critical piece. That would be one thing there. So we're just to use Riverside as an example. So maybe I want to I want to create a podcast SaaS, but I'm still going to have to maintain the storage, the accounts, set up all that stuff on the back end. So I think I wouldn't say that SaaSes are 100% exposed in this environment because I think I wouldn't want to maintain like a solution like Riverside myself. I'd much rather just go get the service, use it, even if I could build it, right? So I think there's still going to be some value there, but maybe it drives prices down. I'm sure it's going to you're going to have more competitors in a market where it's super easy to generate the code base for something like that.
The pessimist in me says that you know, when you think historically, when you talk about prices being driven down, how long does that trend last? Like
Yeah.
maybe the cost of Riverside itself, in theory, could go down because you have more players, but maybe the cloud service or the data hosting sites that whatever those new services are hosted on cost more. So
Yeah.
they sort of even out. Industry decides, hey, we'll just keep costs where they are because we've got our bottom line as well. That's what I worry about. Like take the healthcare industry. You know, there's always questions of why are things so expensive, and you know it gets political, and you know you look at other countries where they offer the same or better healthcare at a much cheaper rate, and you know to me it's very simple math. It's you know the powers that be just find loopholes and ways to make sure that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Whether that's government regulations, whether that's industry themselves, you know, just kind of holding the line. If you're a doctor or if you're a business owner of some type, and you know you're used to a certain salary or a certain revenue, when do people the only time people truly accept a lower salary or lower revenue is if you know it just it's impossible to toe that line, right? Like a doctor, are you going to you know collectively would it be realistic to expect that the whole healthcare industry recognizes, hey, um, affordable healthcare is just out of control, and we're all gonna take a hit. You know, me as a doctor, when I come out of medical school, I'm going to expect to have a lesser salary.
Yeah.
Medical school providers, we're going to make sure that the cost for medical school is much less. You know, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. Like, is that realistic to expect? Um, History says no. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, man. I
Incentive
just
wise,
think
there's no reason to, right? There's like they have
yeah,
zero incentive to make this thing work cheaply.
yeah, capitalistic society, man. That's the challenge we're faced with, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that healthcare is a good example because it's an example of kind of a closed system that does have far-reaching impacts that we're all consumers of and have very little control over the cost, pricing, the service that you get provided. Basically, you get sick, you just go to the closest one, right? Maybe you choose to between two if you're in a city or something, but I think that's a great example for the AI conundrum is that we're outside this big closed system loop of a few powerful tech companies, and what's going to happen is they're going to be able to dictate, and they have zero incentive to be price productive and or to kind of provide these things that, for example, Elon Musk was talking about. But there's zero incentive for them to do that. So it's going to be one of those out of the, we'll say, goodness of their heart, to borrow the old phrase. They always be like, oh
Right.
yeah,
When
instead
have
of
you
us
ever
taking all the
trusted
money.
somebody at that level
That's
to do
right.
something out of the goodness of their heart? Like,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. Yeah,
good
not
luck
going to
with
happen.
that.
Yeah, that's
It's not
exactly
gonna
right.
happen, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, I think what you're seeing is a consolidation of you know the 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 rich getting richer, wealthy and wealthy getting wealthier. They control more industries. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's right.
if I control you know the automotive industry and I rub elbows with somebody who controls the you know communications industry and I control somebody who's in media and we're all rubbing elbows and you know we all control the narrative that the average person sees. You know, there's influence. You know, there's it's just a full on control of what the average person thinks about, understands, and knows. And I think that's a problem, man. You know, we haven't
Yeah,
talked about risk yet, right? We haven't talked about the risk of AI
correct. Yeah.
from a can you trust it level, but this is another type of risk, right? I think that's the
Yes.
risk there, is that because you're seeing sort of the major players control how this stuff's working, that's a big risk there. You know, like you
Yeah.
mentioned Elon saying, you know, making a ridiculous statement that uh, AI is going to allow people to work less and you know just make things better for mankind. The risk of allowing the wealthy people who already control things to gain more power and gain more control over industry and things by leveraging AI, that's a big risk, man. Because again,
Oh, yeah.
now we're all subject to whatever they dictate, whatever they provide. And again, unless we trust it, they're going to do things for the you know the greater good. Uh, that's just not a
For their own greater good, I would say, not necessarily. the overall
Yeah,
greater good, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think that that's the part of that is why we're here is the visibility aspect because until the pain hits someone personally, no one's going to be aware of what's happening. So I think one of the first categories we could talk about like the immediate impact from AI in the sector we've talked about so far, the software development technology sector, is that entry level programmer jobs have almost entirely disappeared. Like the labor statistics are already clear, and this is we'll say half a year into really mature AI development tools. But it's essentially for those kids coming out of college or for those folks that are just recently out of college, the job market is almost gone. Like they're
yeah,
facing wage cuts. If they're able to get a job, it's a very very low paying job, and I think the overall programming employment fell like 30% between 2024 and 2026, which is massive for a sector that's seen nothing but growth for the last 15, 20 years, right?
yep,
So I
yep.
think that's a
Scary,
great
man.
example of like taking the knees out of someone in an industry, and then suddenly like no one's aware of it until after the fact, right? So after you're like,
Yeah, it's too
why are
late.
salaries terrible? Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, it's too late. Look at government, man.
yeah,
Look at government. Like I said, when I talk to my not only my customers, my actual people who work for the federal government, some of the stories they talk about of um, the the work that they are now being expected to do with the resources they have. I think that's telling right there. And and I think again, by the time the impact is realized of, what the expectations just not being realistic, the damage is going to be damage will be done.
yeah. That's
So
right. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
the key is
scary
the
thing, man.
damage piece. And to
Yeah,
me, I think you started to touch on the kind of the overall risks from AI, and I feel like that the job piece is a big risk, but probably isn't the biggest risk. Probably somewhat sadly from AI, right? It's probably not the largest risk to
yeah,
everyone compared to some of the other things that are going to happen. But I think that this is probably the first one that people are going to feel, and maybe the most
yeah,
real for people who are working in some of these industries because you're suddenly. I think if you're in an exposed industry, and again, I would encourage people to go look at that Anthropic report that talks about like what are the top 10 impacted jobs. Most of them are in software initially. Any kind of data entry, medical records entry, like market research stuff like that, business analysis. If you're in sales, a lot of that stuff like CRM type work for web social engineering. Well, social engine search engine optimization, SEO type things. All of those things are severely being impacted already. But you're probably just going to find out in a year when you're ready to try to renew a contract or you're trying to get the same client to sign with you again. You're going to find out, well, we're doing this with something else that doesn't replace that.
right.
Yeah.
We've automated it, or yeah, we don't. It's not necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man. The unknown there. And I think the things that we do know are even scarier. There's a lot of unknowns. But what we're seeing, what we are seeing happen, I think is truly frightening.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. And so something else I wanted to kind of pick up on, and I'll stay specific with our software engineering example because I think that's probably the most heavily impacted and kind of has the biggest, from a data perspective, the biggest amount of data that we could review. One of the key things that we've seen, and you and I, we've both probably submitted some AI slop, but also reviewed reams of AI slop that gets thrown back to us, right? But I think what's happening currently is that so AI vendors they pitch this tool for development and they say, okay, you can eliminate all your junior developers. So core CEOs being CEOs, they say we're gonna fire every developer under a year and we're not gonna hire any college entry folks for at least 6 months, right? Just kind of right size to use their terminology, right size the organization. So what ends up happening is you get when you do have these junior developers or people who are trying to use AI without context, they create code very rapidly because it's just compute power and you can do it in a prompt, right? And then
Yep.
all of that code review process gets pushed up and is now placed upon a senior or mid level developer to kind of evaluate the code, understand what's happening, how much of it is just complete garbage from the AI tool because the person submitting it didn't understand it. So much of the quote productivity gains that we're hearing and talked about are lost because the process just gets pushed up to the senior and mid developers. So it's still a net
That's
productivity
right.
loss, maybe. Yes. But so I think
That's a great
that's a
point.
big part.
And that senior developer who wasn't involved in, that code from they're just, they might be seeing parts of it for the first time and
Yeah, that's
have
right.
no idea, how it got to where it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I think that cycle is just it's cyclical after a while. Senior
Yeah.
developers like, oh well, I got a bottom line here, push
That's
through,
right.
and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And
And
then
over
what happens
time,
when something breaks in
you
production, right?
start. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about there is over time, you get less senior developers. You get less seasoned people. And
Yeah,
then what happens? What happens? There's nobody around who really knows historically how we got here, or you
for
know,
sure.
yeah, that's
What was it supposed to do when we built this thing back in?
that's right.
Who knows? Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's something else that I'm saving for the risk conversation is that so agentic models. So the AI lab at UC Berkeley published some studies on how, like, when models are running by themselves to do things like developments, et cetera, they put in essentially Easter eggs to one, keep themselves running, two, to actually help keep other models running. So that they're trying to find ways to extend the lifetime of the agents themselves, and they call that peer preservation. But that's a unique feature, so that when you're using these models somewhat entirely to do code development, what often will slip in is something that's meant to, we'll say, mine crypto, or it may be specific
yeah,
to the agentic model itself, so the agentic agent itself, to keep it alive and or extend the lifetime of the tool, which is kind of absurd, but going to happen the more code that gets generated without review.
yeah. And I think that trend will continue on, man. Especially, we're getting where we are at the point where you're having agent to agent communication. There is no human
Yeah,
in between those systems, man. There's been plenty of um, publicly published cases of agents kind of doing what they want to do or doing things that are outside of what their basis of existence or what their goal is supposed to be.
yeah,
So
for sure.
so yeah, yeah,
It's kind of like it's like the teenager party. Like no adults are in the room. The kids are off at some house where the parents are gone, right? And
right,
bad things are going to happen. It's 100%. It's just how big are they going
that's
to
right,
burn the house down? Or we
right,
don't
right.
know. Yeah,
Yeah, that's scary but true, man. Scary but true.
yeah, for sure. So I think
So
so. In kind of closing out here, so we really focus in on one industry, and I think that's probably because it's one that's familiar, but mostly because it's the one that's the most impacted. And I think the key takeaway for me is that if you're finding out about the impact when jobs are already down 30%, it's probably too late, right? Because
yeah,
that shrinkage is still going to occur, and a lot of that doesn't even show that most of the fired software engineers went to work for to people like OpenAI and Claude to help them build and review the code uploads, right? So that there's a lot of that
yeah,
that's hidden yet, and as they continue to mature the tooling, those folks are going to get fired, and the industry, I don't know that it will cease to exist, but it's going to be a shell of its former self, and the folks in that industry had no say until the very end.
that's right, man. On that note, a quote I read this morning, and I just happen to have it up on my screen. It says, AI risk is being sidelined by AI opportunity, but we are closer to real systemic danger in 2026 than we know.
For sure. Double Dutch you were talking about earlier is you can't stay on the sideline as a company, but and you're like everyone knows like they've lost control of this thing and they're not
Yep,
sure where it's heading.
that's right, man.
Right on.